Baggage, as you can see. I have to unpack. The first thing I want to do is thank Lon and Jan for the song. One thing, it was fun to sing Bringing in the Sheaves. You know, that says church to me. Absolute church to me.
Thanks Susan for that. She picked them.
And actually, it meshes real well with my talk today, because I'm going to be talking about St. Patrick, and he was bringing in the sheaves in Ireland, you know, and so that meshes perfectly. As does the lovely song by John and Lan. And I want to find this line in the Daily Word, I think, that Rosa just read, that meshes so perfectly too, so I can refer back to that. Aha. It is. Luckily it was the last one, so I can find it. All right. All right. Is this kind of taken care of? Bear with me. Let me say happy St. Patty's Day to everybody. I love talking about St. Patrick. It was actually Dave was scheduled to speak, but I asked him to trade with him so I could tell the St. Patrick story again. I hope you'll bear with me. I'll try to change it up a little bit. Same story, but I have some new jokes. So we'll begin with the fun part. We'll tell some Irish jokes. And, you know, the Irish are known for having strong women. Actually, in the Táin, which is their, which is the equivalent of the Iliad or the Epic of Gilgamesh in terms of ancient writings that come out of Iron Age cultures. In the Táin, they have a queen maid, right, who is known for being beautiful, generous, and brave in battle. So these women actually went to war, and they were as you will. They were unabashedly sexual as well, you know. So it's like women in Rome and Greece and in this era were a little more than slaves. You know, they were basically repressed, but not so in Ireland. You know, it's like even Rome couldn't conquer Ireland, and it's partly because of the women. So anyway, Queen Maeve. She was like a leader in battle, and so she got into an argument, as told in the Táin, like this long bardic poem. She got in an argument with her husband, and she basically was telling him he was a kept man because all of his wealth was hers that she had given him. You know, and he, of course, I mean, you know, these are competitive folks, right? He's not going to settle for this. So he starts going through an inventory and basically saying, man, you'd be nothing without me. So he goes through an inventory of all of his wealth and all that he's brought to the kingdom, and he includes a prize bull whose name I cannot pronounce, but anyway, it was a fine bull. And in the Táin, it's listed as being worth the price of 5 bond maids. So it's like worth 5 female slaves. Right? They love their bulls in Ireland. But she can't have this. She can't have this. So she rushes out and does inventory of all of her rams and all of her cattle. She can't find anything that will compare to this great bull, but she hears of one. She hears of one in somebody else's little kingdom. And so she sends an emissary to the chief of this little chiefdom, you know, promising gifts, including her friendly thighs, right? In trade for this bull, you know, so that she can keep up with her husband, you know. But he turns her down, and so they have to have a war over it. And I can't remember what the outcome was, but the point of the story is that these people are not easily controlled. They're not stifled, they're not polite, and they're not easily controlled.
What is that right?
It's like an understatement. It's like an understatement. So anyway, so that wasn't one of my Irish jokes, but that's the warm-up for my Irish jokes about strong women. And the first one is, so I'm going to tell you about Finnegan, you know, and poor Finnegan had a few too many pints she have any parting words? And Finnegan said, there's been a continuous stream of conversation 40 years long. So he did. Sorry. He's been talking for 40 years.
Yeah.
More than just the last line.
More than just the last line. Yeah. He couldn't separate it from the rest. All right, so St. Patrick, I don't have a Catholic background, and so I don't accept the Catholic saints. I kind of have to ratify them for myself if I learn something about them, because I don't really know anything about the Catholic background because it's not Catholicism. But some years ago, I was given this book by my brother-in-law, How the Irish Saved Civilization, and in it there is included the story of St. Patrick. And upon reading St. Patrick's story, I accepted, I ratified St. Patrick's sainthood. That he was a saint for me too. I've accepted it. And so I'm going to tell you the story now in brief. You can wave at me if I go on too long, or you can go like this. St. Patrick, he was a privileged lad in 5th century Britain, actually. And in that he was the son of a family of Roman citizens. So he was a British Celtic ethnicity, but his family was a Roman citizen. He was a Roman citizen, and his family probably owned slaves. Slavery is common all over the world in the 5th century. I mean, we see it in the Greeks, the Romans. It was occurring in Africa. It was all over Europe. And it was one of those unfortunate aspects of our human history that was practically universal at a certain level of civilization. So anyway, St. Patrick's family owned slaves. And they probably spoke the Gaelic language that the Irish did, but he may not have even understood what they were saying, because it's likely that they spoke Latin in his household. And so he's a privileged lad. Until one day, there comes an Irish boat up, I don't know if it was by sea or up a river into the land. The Irish made round boats, and they covered them with round leather boats, and they floated with where they will, kind of like the Vikings, and they took hostages, yanked them back to Ireland, and made slaves out of them. So Patrick, as a teenager, was yanked out of school, he was taken away from his friends, and he lands in Ireland, where he gets to be a shepherd's boy slave for some years, amongst people who he rarely sees, but when he does see them, they're very likely not nice to him, and they very likely speak a language he doesn't even understand. So he's been yanked from the lap of privilege and tossed out into the wilderness, where he is frequently cold, frequently hungry, and has sheep to tend, and a lot of time to pray. So as a teenager, he was not so taken with the faith of his family, but now that he's isolated out in the wilderness in Ireland among these barbarians, he prays 100 times each day and 100 times each night. And I don't know what his prayers were, but I can only imagine that after a while he quit praying for food or warmth, or even for freedom. After a while, I imagine he was just praying, oh God. And that his deepest desire, which I believe is all of our deepest desire, is communion with that one God that is the ground of our being. And so I believe that he achieved his goal. He's as a slave boy in Ireland, that he experienced communion with God, and that it, number one, allowed him to survive, because many young people wouldn't have survived this ordeal. So number one, he survived, and number two, he has an evolution in consciousness, kind of like Moses after 40 years in the desert. He has this evolution of consciousness and begins to have dreams, and one of his dreams is, Patrick, your ship is ready. So Patrick, slave boy in Ireland, heads off across Ireland toward the sea. Now this is not an easy task because in cultures, societies that have slavery, it's considered criminal to harbor a slave. It was in the American South. The Code of Hammurabi, which is however many hundreds of years old, harboring a slave was considered a crime. So here he is, still a boy, traveling possibly 200 miles across Ireland to the coast, where he presents himself. If there's a ship there, he presents himself and asks to be let on, and they say no. And he turns to go, and as he's walking away, they call him back, and they say, yes, come and be on our ship. So he boards the ship, and they set sail. And of course, this is a long time ago, this history, so we're not sure where they landed, but we don't think it was Ireland. We think it may have been, we don't think it was Britain. I think it may have been like France or Europe there. And so he and his friends who rescued him from the ship, they're on land, but they're wandering through this a desolation time. It could have been the wreckage of the German horde that had just invaded. So they're isolated and they're alone and they're hungry, and they're saying to him, even the dogs are about to starve. You talk a lot about this God, Patrick. Why don't you pray to him now and see if we can survive? So Patrick prays, and they hear the sound of hoofs on the trail, and there's a herd of pigs, hogs, and so they're able to slay the hogs and eat, and therefore survive. And so that kind of made believers of his shipmates. So after some years wandering, or some time unknown, he makes it back to Britain, where his family welcomes him with open arms. They welcome him as a son, and they ask him never to leave again. And he may have agreed not to leave, but the dream came again. And in one of his dreams, a friend of his, Victoria, has a basket of letters for Patrick to read. And he hands Patrick a letter, and Patrick opens the letter, and when he opens the letter, he hears the cries of the Irish, his former slave masters. He hears them crying out to him to come and walk amongst us again. And he feels a stab in the heart, and that is his calling to minister to the Irish. And if that's not something that's easy to do, you can't just hop on a plane and go back. And his education was interrupted, but he puts in the hard, daily, step-by-step work of studying for the ministry and applying to be ordained. And that takes him some years also, and he becomes an ordained priest and a bishop. And then he becomes the first missionary to travel beyond the bounds of civilization in order to do missionary work. Even Paul stayed within the confines of the known civilized world. Thomas, the disciple or the apostle Thomas, went to India, but India was a relatively civilized place, whereas Ireland was barbaric. Ireland was barbaric. And so this former slave boy, with love in his heart, because of his calling, goes back to Ireland to minister to the Irish. And so that's why I love this story. And we'll tell it every year if you give me a chance. Because, I'm a Course in Miracles student, and so in the Course in Miracles, forgiveness is the path to enlightenment. And so this is the story of Patrick's forgiveness of the Irish and the ministry to the Irish. And I like to believe that, like in the daily words that Rosa read, that he prayed enough. He'd had enough time in the wilderness and enough time in solitude and enough prayer to know that no external condition or circumstance can hold us in bondage once we have awakened to our oneness with God. And so I think that Patrick was at least partly awakened to his oneness with God. And that he could say namaste to the Irish. He could see the Christ in them. And that he had moved from bondage into complete freedom, and that complete freedom is to serve God, to serve Christ. The Christ that is the truth of each of us. That divine light that enlightens each of us. So he headed back to Ireland, and which was no easy task, because like I say, these are Iron Age warriors. They lived in like petty chiefdoms. They had little kings, and they lived in petty chiefdoms, and they survived. Their economy was animal husbandry and slavery, and the values that they honored the most were bravery, generosity, and beauty. And those make for great stories, bravery and generosity. You can see that in the Iliad, and then probably if you go to the movies this weekend, you can see bravery, generosity, and beauty. And because it makes for great ego drama. But I want to suggest to you that it's indicative, that value system is indicative of bondage. And that we need to move, like Patrick, from bondage to freedom from that. I need to use the Course in Miracles term with you here now, and it's ego. And one fun way to define ego is how we edge God out. E-G-O, edge God out. And the purpose of that is to feel like we're autonomous, on our own boss. You know, we can do what we want. We can believe that we can turn our basic fear that comes from a sense of separation from God. We can transform that into a sense of bravery while we're edging God out. And that's one of the reasons that bravery is so valued in a warrior culture, because there's so much fear. And the Irish had fearsome gods that devoured humans, and they rushed into battle naked, except for a golden torch around their neck. And they were known for their bravery. And what they did, they had what they call a warp spasm. You know, warp spasm is sort of like the Vikings would go berserk in their battle cries. Well, the Irish would have their version of that, and their psyches were transformed, and their fear was transformed from terror into fierce bravery. And I think that the ego trick that shows we're still bound when we're able to do that. Another value in their culture was generosity, but in a way it's kind of hard to believe that they really valued generosity, because one of the things these little tribes, these petty chiefdoms did, is they stole cattle from each other all the time. You know? Well, that was part and parcel of Irish life in the 5th century, was doing cattle raids against your neighbor, and doing slave raids against any neighboring community to bring back slaves. And so that doesn't seem generous to me. So it seems like their valuing of generosity reflected their meanness of spirit, their graspingness. That was a result of their feeling that they were separate from God. I see that as an ego symptom. That's a sign that we've edged God out. When we need to take slaves, when we need to steal, we need to compete with one another. That's a little signal that we, in our awareness, we've edged God out of our awareness. Because when you're aware of your source, aware of that connectedness with God, there's no need to do that. There's no need to do that. The other prime value was to the beauty or handsomeness. And Thomas Cahill, who wrote the little book that I'm drawing most of this from, suggested that was in fact a reaction to their tendency to be jealous. You know, a lot of jealousy going on. But the belief is, if you can be beautiful enough, reaction to the basic ego mindset that really got us out of our awareness, that we're lonely, scared, insecure, needy, and terrified. I think those are all forms of fear. And I think that's an example of how people can compensate for those forms of fear. So these are the people that Patrick went to in his new freedom that he went to minister to. And so he did. Now I don't know if we don't know if he actually told the story of the shamrock, or if that was made up post-Patrick. But he did minister to the Irish. And so while the Roman Empire was crumbling in chaos, Patrick was bringing some peace and some love to Ireland. And so I have to honor him for that. He was also the first person historically to speak out unequivocally against slavery, because in these times slavery was acknowledged and pretty well accepted, pretty much worldwide. And so Patrick was one of the first human beings to say, no, slavery is wrong. Hammurabi and and later on I'm not certain, but I believe in the Quran there are some limits placed on slavery, but it's not abolished. Excuse me. Even Jesus didn't say no more slavery. I think he said it all when he said, love your brother as yourself. Because you can't do that and be a slaver. But so Patrick is the first person in history who said no unequivocally to slavery. And so I have to honor him for that. So in his return, wasn't easy. There were times when he faced death. These people could easily have turned on him and killed him. And but I have to ask myself, well, why didn't that happen? I think maybe if I journeyed out into the wilderness with the wild Irish, or in some forsaken place, I might just get killed. I have to ask myself why. What empowered Patrick to be successful in this mission? And I, of course, believe that it was in his connection with his source, in his freedom, he was able to see the Christ in the Irish people. Now, again, in the Course in Miracles, it tells us that we're to that we can see everything as either love or a call for love. I believe possibly Patrick was able to do that. That in their viciousness, in their competition, in their warlike bravado, that beyond that there is that suffering that is a call for God, a call to become aware of love and to experience love. So I believe that Patrick saw to namaste those wild Irish people, to see the Christ in them, and to serve them well because of that. And so that's why my title, my talk today is Freedom, because I believe that is freedom. That there are ego versions of freedom, but they only free us a little bit for a little while. True freedom comes with allowing into our awareness, our oneness with our source, and seeing that divine light in all the people, regardless of the circumstances. See through appearances to the one light. And remembering, we read in our course group this morning, remembering the eternal timelessness we share with God. So whatever comes to pass in time, just comes to pass. And if we're grounded in that eternal timelessness that we share with God, then we don't have to be buffeted about by the winds of external change. Or as in the daily word, we don't have to be in bondage to any external conditions. And that's freedom. So I think that this is a short talk, but that isn't it. your breath. Your breathing become deep and slow. Allow yourself to become aware of that safety and that love that is